First, it's nice to be back here tonight. It's unfortunate that we're doing it when we've had this horrific tragedy in Israel. The terror and devastation unleashed on Israelis by Iran-backed Hamas terrorists have rightly horrified the world. Innocent families were murdered in their homes. Children were beheaded. Girls were raped. Whole families were burned alive. An elderly wheelchair-bound woman, later identified as a Holocaust survivor, was brutally dragged through the streets of Gaza. Children who witnessed murders of their parents have been kidnapped and are being held hostage by Hamas. Hundreds were mowed down at a music festival. Thousands are dead. At least 33 Americans are dead and 10 are held hostage. The atrocities are too numerous to fully recount, but the images we have seen will never leave our memories. In 2019, my wife Ann and I had the opportunity to visit Kfar Aza, one of the kibbutz that was the site to a complete massacre. As we watched the early reports, we became worried about what was going to happen to all the people we had met there. It's only about a half a mile from Gaza. And when we heard the news that it was the site of one of the most horrific and barbaric activities, our hearts just sank. We did learn that Shen, the lady that had led our tour then, was out of the country and was alive. So we were able to talk with her and hear about exactly what happened there, and about some of the atrocities and what happened to the people that she loved and lived with. This week I had the opportunity to meet with some of the survivors. Met with a young man that was holed up in his safe room for hours, and then he finally found out that his parents were kidnapped. Met with a young lady that invited a whole bunch of her friends, because she had been to this festival before, to the festival, and now those individuals are dead. Another couple of her friends are kidnapped. Not since the Holocaust has the world witnessed such a brutal attack on the Jewish people. I think we have to keep repeating this so no one ever forgets. We have to really let that sink in and never let people forget. It's 2023, and it sure looks like history is repeating itself. I got moms in my state calling to say they're scared to death of their kids going to preschool. They want their kids to have a Jewish education, but they're scared their toddlers will be targeted. If parents don't feel safe sending their kids to Jewish day schools, they're going to close. We cannot let that happen. I've talked to a lot of people that are afraid to go to Chabad's and synagogues for services. If we stop having these services, where is the Jewish people going to go? We can't let that happen. We've watched Jewish kids in our colleges be targeted with pro-Hamas rallies. We saw what happened at Cooper Union, where we had the Jewish students stuck in the library where the individuals outside were chanting. This is sick. It's no way for anybody to have to live. When our daughters were in their teenage years, my wife and I took them to Auschwitz and Birkenau so they could understand exactly what happened during the Holocaust. We want to make sure our kids understand the horrors and make sure history doesn't repeat itself. Unfortunately, we have many people around the world who simply hate Jews and want to pretend the Holocaust never happened. A few years ago, I had to fight to get a principal in Florida fired because he said, quote, "I can't say the Holocaust is a factual historical event." You can't imagine that happening in this country. We have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Of course, we all have figured out as we get older, there's pure evil in the world. And we know there are terrorists who want Israel and all Jewish people wiped off the face of the earth. We also have people who've been elected in our country to represent us, are paid with our tax dollars, who are saying the most insane and anti-Semitic things. Ilhan Omar, it's, quote, scary to work with members of Congress who condemn Hamas' attack on Israel. Talib, quote, "I'm ashamed of members of Congress who refuse to call for a ceasefire. After she repeatedly repeats the false claim that Israel bombed the hospital. She says, condemning Israel, we are literally watching people commit genocide, and we stand by and say nothing. How about Obama? Quote, it means acknowledging the Palestinians have also lived in disputed territories for generations, that many of them were not only displaced when Israel was formed, but continue to be forcibly displaced by a settler movement that too often has received tacit and explicit support from the Israeli government, the Palestinian leaders who have been willing to make concessions for a two-state solution and too often too little to show for their efforts. Now, we all know the Squad and many Democrats hate Israel, no surprise there. But our former president, he doesn't understand the fabric of this country. He remains a candle in the wind, saying he's 100% for Israel while making excuses for terrorists like Hamas. And he'll never do anything to call out Hamas and all these terrorists. He's too afraid. Now let's take Biden. He's just following the path Obama wandered aimlessly, supporting everything and nothing. Everything except our freedoms, our nation, democracy, and Israel. And it's the failed actions of Obama that have been continued by the Biden administration today. The Biden administration policy has rooted in the false belief that in the West, if we just keep throwing our tax dollars to Gaza, that if we free up $6 billion of money for Iran, if we release the sanctions, then all will be well. They believe if the US, Europeans, and others will give the mullahs in Iran enough money, relief with money and diplomacy, the regime will stop chanting, death to America, death to Zionist occupiers. Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disgrace. And now we're seeing equipment that was left in Afghanistan used by Hamas. Our enemies want to harm, isolate, and weaken America and our allies. We've got a wide open southern border where we know terrorists have come across, and we don't know how many people have come across here to hurt our country. People are illegally walking across the border, and they're able to get on an airplane and sit right next to us. We have a president that can barely talk about American hostages and the American that died. Instead of sitting in the Situation Room figuring out how he's going to get our hostages back, he goes to the beach in Delaware. When he addressed the nation, he mentioned Ukraine 23 times, but hostages only 2. In his 15-minute speech, he only talked about American hostages 15 seconds, and 0 seconds on a plan to bring our hostages back. We put out a picture of all the hostages outside our office, and 2 of the families gave me this. Their sons are fighting for the IDF. They grew up in this country. They went to fight the IDF, and they've been kidnapped. Biden's State Department has acknowledged that money that we give to Gaza goes to Hamas. So last week, with the support of my Republican colleagues, I went down to Senate floor and said, we had a bill, no money for Hamas. Chuck Schumer and the Democrats blocked it. The U.S., we have no choice. We have to support Israel and every Jew in this country and every Jew we can around the world. Biden just put an unserious proposal together that tied Israeli aid to money for sanctuary cities. That can't happen. We need to do the money for Israel right now, and we can. I've talked to a lot of people that say this is the scariest time of their lifetime, and it looks really grim. But we can change all this. It's all up to us. The people in this room can change the direction of this country, and I believe you will. I believe we will have a new president, a Republican president. I believe we're going to have a Republican majority in the Senate and a bigger Republican majority in the House. And just think what we had with the last president, the most pro-Israel president in the history of this country. You know, some people have different opinions about Donald Trump, but he did more for Israel than any president in the country. We defeated ISIS. We moved the embassy to Jerusalem, its rightful home. And he held vicious Iranian murderers like Soleimani accountable for the American lives and Israeli lives they killed. Our southern border was secured, and we had peace through the Abraham Accords. Since Biden took office, he's done everything he can to destroy the peace in the Middle East and the opportunity Israel had to make peace with so many countries over there. Now, here's what we need to do. We all have to stand up in this country for our Jewish neighbors. So number one, in every race, not just federal races, but in every race, we need to be asking the people running, are you going to support the Jews in this country, and are you going to support Israel? If they don't, they shouldn't be elected. Number two, we should expect all of our elected leaders to make sure our Jewish day schools, our synagogues, our Chabads are all safe. When I was governor of Florida, and it's continued since I left, we provided more money for security at our Jewish day schools, and we provided security when our synagogues and Chabads needed it. We have to keep doing that. So we have every opportunity to change the direction. I just want to thank Matt Brooks and Norm Coleman for what you do each and every day. You do a great job. I want to highlight our Florida guy, Matt Bogdanoff, where I don't know where he's sitting. He does a great job. Here's a couple other things we can do. I was at a dinner in Houston a week or so ago with Larry Levine, and he just told me the story that he heard that the union at Starbucks was supporting Hamas. So I had not heard it, so I put out that we should all boycott Starbucks. About an hour later, so they called back and said, you know, we don't do that. We don't put out statements. So we just started calling everybody that could around the country, and we started this boycott, and by 7 o'clock that night, Starbucks changed. We all have to do that. I want to thank Davis Polk, and I want to thank Sweet Greens for saying they're not going to hire those students that want to support Hamas. I want to thank the donors at Harvard, the University of Penn, that said they're not going to give any more money. So we all have a role to play to make sure we support Israel, and we support the Jewish people in our states. I will do everything I can. If there's anything anybody needs, I have a great team in my state of Florida. We have 9 offices. I have a great team in DC. If you have any ideas of things I should work on, let me know. It's great to be here. Have a great night. Bye-bye.